I smooth down my lavender dress one more time, the same one I've worn to Sunday service for 20 years. The fabric has faded slightly, but it still makes me feel dignified, especially paired with Robert's pearls, the ones he gave me for our 40th anniversary, just 2 years before he passed. My hands shake a little as I adjust the clasp, but I tell myself it's just the morning chill. St. Matthew's Church buzzes with its usual pre-service energy. Mrs. Henderson waves from across the sanctuary, and I manage a smile, though my chest feels tight. I've been sitting in the same pew for decades, third row from the front, right side, where Robert and I raised our 3 children. Now it's just me, every Sunday, waiting for David to finish his deacon duties. "Morning, Mrs. Williams," says young Tommy Peterson, Pastor Williams' grandson. "You look lovely today." "Thank you, sweetheart," I whisper, my voice barely audible. I used to speak up more in church, used to volunteer for committees and organize potluck dinners. But lately, I find myself shrinking, trying to take up less space, make less noise. The organ begins its familiar hymn, and I watch David approach the altar. At 45, he's still handsome, got his father's strong jaw and broad shoulders. The congregation admires him, this devoted son who never married because he was too busy caring for his aging mother. That's what they think, anyway. That's what he tells them. "Let us pray," Pastor Williams announces, and I bow my head, but my eyes dart sideways to watch David. He looks so peaceful, so holy in his crisp white shirt and navy tie. His hands are folded perfectly, his expression serene. This is the David everyone sees, the David who helps elderly Mrs. Patterson to her car, who organizes the church food drive, who never misses a service. My breathing hitches slightly, and I press my hand to my chest. The new heart medication makes me winded sometimes, especially when I'm anxious. Dr. Martinez explained it's perfectly normal for someone my age, but I've learned to hold my breath when I can, to stay quiet, to be invisible. Communion begins, and David steps forward to help distribute the wine. He moves with such grace, such reverence. When Mrs. Chen struggles to hold the cup with her arthritic hands, David steadies it gently, his touch careful and kind. My heart swells with pride despite everything. This is still my son, the boy I raised, the man I love. After communion, David walks back toward our pew, and I feel my body tense automatically. But then he does something unexpected, something that makes the entire congregation smile. He leans down and kisses my cheek, right there in front of everyone. "I love you, Mom," he whispers, just loud enough for the people around us to hear. The warmth of his lips on my skin feels genuine, and for a moment, I let myself believe it. Maybe today will be different. Maybe the medication change has helped his mood too. Maybe we can have one peaceful Sunday. Mrs. Patterson turns around and beams at us. "Isn't that sweet?" she mouths to her husband. "Such a good son." I nod and try to smile back, but my hands are trembling now, clutching my purse so tightly my knuckles have gone white. Because I know something Mrs. Patterson doesn't know, something none of these good people know. I know what happens after church. I know that the moment we step outside these sacred walls, my loving son will transform into someone I barely recognize. I know that my breathing, this stupid, involuntary function I can't control, will trigger a rage so cold and calculated it makes my blood freeze. I know that the 20-minute drive home will feel like 20 hours of verbal assault, threats, and psychological torture that will leave me questioning my own sanity. I know that everyone here sees David's public face, the kiss, the whispered, "I love you," the gentle way he helps me stand when the service ends. But they don't see what happens in the car, in our house, in the spaces between these perfect Sunday moments. As Pastor Williams delivers his closing blessing about love and family, I close my eyes and try to prepare myself for what's coming. The same thing that happens every single Sunday. The kiss was beautiful. The congregation thinks I'm blessed. But I know the truth, and the truth is that in about 10 minutes, this devoted son will spend the entire ride home telling me exactly how much he hates the sound of me breathing. I just have to survive until next Sunday, when we'll do this dance all over again. The church doors close behind us with a soft thud, and I feel the familiar knot form in my stomach. We're not even 5 steps outside when I notice David's pace quickening. My arthritic knees protest as I try to keep up, my sensible black shoes clicking frantically against the concrete. David, honey, could you slow down a bit? I ask, already breathless from the effort. He doesn't respond. Doesn't even turn around. Just keeps walking toward his silver sedan with those long, determined strides that I've learned to fear. Behind us, I can hear the cheerful chatter of other congregants, families making lunch plans, elderly couples helping each other down the church steps, children laughing as they race around the parking lot. My chest tightens, and I can feel my breathing becoming more labored. The new medication Dr. Martinez prescribed makes me winded easily, especially when I'm stressed. Which I always am on Sundays. Which makes the breathing worse. Which makes everything worse. Morning, Margaret. Beautiful service today, wasn't it? Mrs. Henderson calls out from across the parking lot, waving her gloved hand. I lift my hand to wave back, but the movement combined with trying to keep up with David leaves me even more breathless. A small wheeze escapes my lips, barely audible, but David's shoulders stiffen immediately. Lovely. I call back to Mrs. Henderson, though my voice comes out thin and reedy. David stops so abruptly I nearly collide with his back. When he turns around, his face has completely changed. The serene, loving expression from just moments ago has vanished, replaced by something cold and hard that makes my blood freeze. Can you stop that disgusting wheezing? He hisses, his voice low but venomous. Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are? I try to catch my breath, pressing my hand to my chest. I'm sorry, the walking fast makes it hard to. Excuses, he snaps, cutting me off. Always with the excuses. Behind him, I see the Johnsons approaching their car, and David's face immediately transforms again, like flipping a switch. He smiles warmly and waves. Have a blessed Sunday, he calls to them, his voice now filled with that familiar warmth that everyone associates with my devoted son. You too, David. Take care of your sweet mother. Mrs. Johnson replies, beaming at us both. The moment they pass, David's mask drops again. He grabs my elbow, not hard enough to leave a mark, but firm enough to guide me forcefully toward the car. To anyone watching, it probably looks like he's being helpful, steadying his elderly mother. They can't see how his fingers dig into the soft flesh above my elbow bone, or how his grip sends a sharp pain up my arm. Get in the car, he mutters through gritted teeth, still maintaining that false smile for anyone who might be watching. My hands shake as I reach for the door handle, and the effort of bending to get into the low seat leaves me breathless again. Another small wheeze, and I see David's jaw clench in my peripheral vision. David, sweetie. Pastor Williams approaches, still in his robes. Wonderful job with communion today. Your mother must be so proud. David's entire demeanor shifts again, shoulders relaxing, smile becoming genuine, voice taking on that warm, respectful tone he uses with authority figures. Thank you, Pastor. Mom and I were just discussing what a moving sermon that was, weren't we, Mom? I nod quickly, not trusting my voice. Pastor Williams beams at us through my open car door. Margaret, you've raised such a fine young man. The way he cares for you, it's truly inspiring. We should all be so blessed. I'm very, very fortunate, I manage, each word requiring effort as I try to control my breathing. Well, you two have a wonderful afternoon. See you next Sunday. As Pastor Williams walks away, I watch David's reflection in the side mirror. The transformation is immediate and terrifying. His kind expression melts away like ice in summer, replaced by barely contained rage. He climbs into the driver's seat and slams his door hard enough to make me jump. "You sound like a dying animal," he spits, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turn white. "People probably think I'm torturing you." I want to explain about the medication, about my heart condition, about how the stress of these Sunday drives makes everything worse. But I've learned that explanations only fuel his anger. So I try to hold my breath instead, which only makes my chest burn and my need for air more desperate. As we pull out of the church parking lot, I catch sight of families walking together toward the diner across the street, still glowing with Sunday peace and fellowship. Through the car window, their world looks warm and safe, everything mine used to be before these Sunday drives became my weekly descent into hell. The facade has crumbled, and we haven't even left the parking lot yet. The car doors lock with a soft click, and I know I'm trapped. David hasn't even started the engine yet, but his hands are already gripping the steering wheel like he wants to strangle it. I try to sit perfectly still, to make myself invisible, but my chest is still rising and falling too quickly from our walk across the parking lot. "There it is again," he says, his voice dripping with disgust. "That pathetic wheezing." I press my lips together, trying to quiet my breathing, but that only makes it worse. My lungs burn as I fight for air, and a small sound escapes despite my efforts. "Jesus Christ, Mom!" David explodes, slamming his palm against the dashboard. The sound makes me jump, which causes me to gasp, which makes him even angrier. "You sound like a dying animal. Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are?" "I'm sorry," I whisper, my voice barely audible. "The medication Dr. Martinez prescribed." Oh, here we go with the medication excuse again. He turns to glare at me, his eyes cold and hard. "You know what I think. I think you do this on purpose. I think you wheeze and gasp just to get attention, to make people feel sorry for poor little Margaret." My heart pounds faster, which makes my breathing even more labored. "David, that's not, I would never." "Wouldn't you?" He starts the engine with more force than necessary. "You love being the victim, don't you? The poor old widow who can barely breathe, being so generously cared for by her devoted son." As we pull out of the church parking lot, I catch a glimpse of the Petersons helping their elderly grandmother into their minivan. Tommy holds her arm gently while his father adjusts her seatbelt. They're laughing about something, and I feel a sharp pang of longing for such simple kindness. "Look at you, staring at other families," David sneers, following my gaze. "Probably wishing you had a different son, right? Someone who wouldn't call you out on your manipulative behavior." "No, David, I bet that's what you tell Dr. Martinez, isn't it? That your mean son makes you nervous, so that's why you can't breathe properly. Poor Margaret, such a victim." We stop at a red light, and David turns his full attention to me. His face is twisted with contempt, and I shrink back against the passenger door. This is the face he never shows anyone else, the real David, the one who's been emerging more and more over the past 2 years. "You know what's really embarrassing?" he continues, his voice getting louder. "Having to sit in church every Sunday while you make those disgusting sounds. Mrs. Patterson probably thinks I'm slowly poisoning you or something." "David, please." "Please what?" "Please continue to enable your attention-seeking behavior. Please pretend that a grown woman can't control her own breathing." He accelerates as the light turns green, and I grip my purse tighter. "Do you know how many people have asked me if you're okay? If maybe you need to see a specialist?" The familiar neighborhoods blur past my window, the same streets where I used to walk David to school, where we'd collect leaves in the fall and build snowmen in winter. Back when he was my sweet boy who brought me dandelions and told me I was the best mom in the world. I actually had to reassure Pastor Williams last month that you weren't having some kind of medical emergency during service, David says, his voice now filled with mock concern. "I told him you've always been a bit dramatic about your health issues." My chest tightens with more than just difficulty breathing. "You told him what?" That you tend to exaggerate your symptoms for attention. That it's been going on for years. He glances at me with satisfaction. He was very understanding. Said some elderly people do develop attention-seeking behaviors as they age. I stare at him in horror. Pastor Williams has been our family pastor for 15 years. He baptized David, married Robert and me, gave Robert's eulogy. And now he thinks I'm some pathetic old woman making up health problems for attention. David, why would you? Because it's true, he shouts, making me flinch. Everything has to be about you and your breathing problems, your heart medication, your aches and pains. Do you ever think about how hard this is for me? Having to cart you around every Sunday, dealing with your dramatics, making excuses for your behavior? We turn onto Oak Street, just 5 minutes from home, but it feels like an eternity. My breathing is getting worse from the stress, which I know will only make him angrier. It's a vicious cycle. His anger makes me anxious, anxiety makes breathing harder, harder breathing triggers more anger. Maybe I should just drop you off at Sunset Manor right now, David says casually, as if he's suggesting we stop for ice cream. Let the nurses deal with your breathing issues. I'm sure they'd love listening to you wheeze all day long. The threat hits me like a physical blow. Sunset Manor, the nursing home where Mrs. Chen's husband went last year. Where he died 3 months later, alone and forgotten. My greatest fear, and David knows it. Please don't, I whisper, hating how desperate I sound. Then stop making those disgusting sounds. You know what, Mom? David's voice shifts to that sickeningly sweet tone he uses when he's about to say something particularly cruel. I think you're imagining most of this breathing problem. I blink at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean it's all in your head. He taps his temple with his finger, never taking his eyes off the road. You've convinced yourself you can't breathe properly, so now you can't. It's psychological. But Dr. Martinez said the medication can cause. Dr. Martinez is just telling you what you want to hear, David interrupts smoothly. You go in there complaining about breathing issues, so he gives you a diagnosis that validates your feelings. That's what doctors do with hypochondriacs. The word hits me like a slap. Hypochondriac. Is that what I am? I try to remember what Dr. Martinez actually said during my last visit. He'd listened to my chest, asked about the new heart medication, explained that shortness of breath was a common side effect. But now, sitting in this car with David's certainty filling the space between us, I start to doubt my own memory. Think about it logically, David continues, his voice taking on that patient, condescending tone he uses when he thinks he's being reasonable. You breathe fine when you're sleeping. You breathe fine when you're watching TV. But the moment we're in public, suddenly you can't catch your breath? That's not medical, Mom. That's attention-seeking behavior. We pass the Hendersons' house, where I can see them through their kitchen window, probably preparing Sunday lunch together. Mrs. Henderson had seemed genuinely concerned when she'd asked about my health last month. But what if David's right? What if I was just making a big deal out of nothing? Remember when you were convinced you had that brain tumor? David asks, and my stomach drops. You went to 3 different doctors, had all those expensive tests, convinced Dad to take time off work to drive you to appointments. And what was it in the end? Stress headaches. Because you'd worked yourself up into a panic over nothing. I do remember. It was 8 years ago, and I'd been having terrible headaches, forgetting things, feeling dizzy. Robert had been so worried, so supportive through all the testing. But David's right, it turned out to be stress and early menopause symptoms. I'd felt so foolish afterward, so guilty for putting everyone through that ordeal. That's different, I say weakly. This breathing thing, it's real. I can feel it. You felt the brain tumor too, David says with a bitter laugh. You were absolutely certain you were dying. Remember how dramatic you got? Talking about your final wishes, writing letters to us kids like you were on your deathbed? Heat floods my cheeks. I do remember writing those letters, emotional, rambling things about how much I loved my children, how proud I was of them. I'd hidden them in my jewelry box, planning to give them to Robert to distribute after I was gone. When the tests came back negative, I'd been so embarrassed I'd thrown the letters away without telling anyone. You see, David says, noticing my silence. You have a pattern of this, Mom. Creating medical drama when you need attention. I don't need attention, I protest, but my voice sounds uncertain even to me. Don't you? Dad's been gone for 4 years now. Lisa lives across the country. Michael's busy with his own family. When was the last time anyone really focused on you, really worried about you, before this breathing thing started? The question cuts deep because there's truth in it. Since Robert died, there have been days, weeks, even, when I don't talk to another soul except for brief conversations with cashiers and the mailman. The house feels so empty, so quiet. Maybe David's right. Maybe I do miss feeling important to someone, feeling cared for. I'm not making it up, I whisper, but I can hear the doubt creeping into my own voice. I'm not saying you're lying, David says, his tone becoming almost gentle now. I'm saying you're convincing yourself something's wrong because you need the attention, the concern. It's actually pretty common in elderly people who live alone. Elderly people. When did I become elderly people? When did I stop being Margaret Williams who organized bake sales and ran the church Christmas pageant for 10 years? When did I become this fragile, needy person who might be making up symptoms for attention? Look, I get it, David continues, pulling into our driveway. You're lonely. You miss Dad. You want people to worry about you, to ask how you're feeling. But creating fake health scares isn't the answer. As he turns off the engine, I sit in the silence, my mind reeling. Is he right? Have I been unconsciously exaggerating my symptoms? The breathing does seem worse when I'm nervous, when I'm around other people. Maybe it really is psychological. I just want you to be honest with yourself, David says, and for a moment, his voice sounds like the caring son everyone thinks he is. And maybe consider that this generous offer I make every Sunday, driving you to church, spending my whole day taking care of you, maybe you could show a little gratitude instead of making me look bad with your dramatics. I nod slowly, feeling ashamed and confused. Maybe he's right. Maybe I have been ungrateful, selfish, attention-seeking. Maybe I should be thanking him instead of complaining about his tone. I'm sorry, I whisper. I know you are, Mom, he says, patting my hand with what feels like genuine affection. We'll work on it together, okay? But as I sit there, apologizing for my own suffering, a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispers that something about this conversation feels wrong, though I can no longer tell if that voice is wisdom or just more attention-seeking behavior. We sit in the driveway for a moment, the engine ticking as it cools. I'm still processing David's words about my breathing being psychological when the silence is broken by Mrs. Chen walking her little terrier past our house. She waves cheerfully, and I start to lift my hand to wave back. Don't, David says sharply, his hand shooting out to grab my wrist. His fingers wrap around the thin bones, not squeezing hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop my movement. She doesn't need to see you putting on another performance. His touch sends a chill through me. When did my son's hands become something to fear? These are the same hands that used to build Lego castles with me, that I taught to tie shoelaces and hold pencils. Now they feel foreign, threatening. The traffic light at the corner turns red, and we wait. I try to regulate my breathing, to prove to David, and to myself, that I can control it. But the effort of trying not to breathe naturally only makes my chest tighter, and a small wheeze escapes. God damn it! David explodes, and his palm slams against the dashboard with such force that the glove compartment pops open. The sound is like a gunshot in the enclosed space, and I jump violently, my heart hammering against my ribs. See? He shouts, his face contorting with rage. You're doing it again. Right after we just talked about this. I'm sorry, I try to explain, but the shock of his outburst has left me gasping. Sorry isn't good enough. His whole body turns toward me, and suddenly he seems enormous in the confined space of the car. David is 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered like his father, but Robert never used his size to frighten me. David does, and he knows it. He leans toward me, his face inches from mine, and I instinctively press myself against the passenger door. The door handle digs into my back, but there's nowhere else to go. His eyes are dark, furious, and for a terrifying moment, I think he might actually hit me. You just can't help yourself, can you? He hisses, his voice low and menacing. Even when I'm trying to help you understand what you're doing wrong, you keep making those pathetic sounds. I want to explain that the shock of his violent gesture made it worse, that I'm scared, that my heart is racing from fear. But I've learned that explanations only make him angrier. So I sit frozen, barely breathing at all now, which makes my lungs burn and my head feel light. Look at you, he says with disgust, his eyes scanning my face. Cowering like I'm some kind of monster. Is that the story you'll tell people? That your son frightens you? The truth is, he does frighten me. This man who used to bring me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, who cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke up with him, who gave the most beautiful eulogy at his father's funeral. This man who kisses my cheek in church has become someone I don't recognize. I would never, I start to say, but he cuts me off. Never what? Never tell people I'm the problem. Never paint yourself as the victim. His laugh is cold, bitter. Because that's what you do, isn't it, Mom? You make people feel sorry for you. I remember last week when he'd helped me out of bed after I'd slept poorly, his grip on my arm too tight, too rough. I'd stumbled slightly, and he'd steadied me with hands that felt more like restraints than assistance. Later, I'd found finger-shaped bruises on my upper arm, faint purple marks that I'd covered with long sleeves. Now, trapped in this car with him looming over me, I understand that those bruises weren't accidental. They were a message, a reminder of his strength compared to my fragility. David, please, I whisper, and I hate how small my voice sounds. I'm trying to do better. Are you? He shifts even closer, and I can smell his cologne, the same one Robert used to wear. The scent that once meant comfort and safety now makes my stomach clench with fear. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're still playing the victim. The light turns green, but David doesn't move. He just stares at me with those cold eyes, letting the weight of his physical presence fill the space between us. Cars begin to honk behind us, but he doesn't seem to care. You know what I think, he says, his voice dropping to a whisper that's somehow more terrifying than his shouting. I think you like being afraid. I think you like feeling helpless because it gives you an excuse to act pathetic. Finally, he turns back to the steering wheel and accelerates through the intersection. But the damage is done. My whole body is shaking now, not from cold but from the primal fear that comes from being trapped with someone who could hurt you, someone who wants you to know they could hurt you. As we pull into our driveway, I realize that David has never actually struck me. He doesn't need to. The threat is always there, hovering in his size, his strength, his barely contained anger. He's learned that intimidation can be just as effective as violence, and it leaves no visible marks for others to see. Next Sunday, he says as he turns off the engine, his voice now calm and controlled, I expect better behavior from you. I nod quickly, eager to agree, to appease, to end this awful ride. But inside, something small and stubborn whispers that no mother should have to fear her own child's hands. As we sit in the driveway, my hands still trembling from David's outburst, a memory surfaces that makes my stomach drop. 3 weeks ago, after Sunday service, Mrs. Patterson had approached me in the church lobby with her usual warm smile. Margaret, dear, she'd said, pressing a small piece of paper into my palm. I've written down my phone number. I know Sunday afternoons can get lonely, and I'd love for you to call me sometime. Maybe we could have tea this week. I'd felt a surge of gratitude. When was the last time someone had invited me for tea? But before I could respond, David had appeared at my elbow, his hand settling on my shoulder in what looked like an affectionate gesture. "That's so thoughtful of you, Mrs. Patterson," he'd said with that charming smile everyone loved. "But Mom gets confused with phone numbers sometimes." "Don't you, Mom?" I'd stared at him, bewildered. Confused? I'd been balancing checkbooks and managing household finances for 50 years. But David had squeezed my shoulder just hard enough to send a message, and I'd found myself nodding. Yes, sometimes I do mix up numbers," I'd heard myself saying. Mrs. Patterson's face had fallen slightly. "Oh, well, perhaps David could help you dial when you want to call. Mom's not really up for social visits right now," David had said smoothly, his grip on my shoulder tightening. "The doctor says too much stimulation isn't good for her condition. She tires easily." "What condition?" I'd wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat. Mrs. Patterson had nodded sympathetically and tucked the paper back into her purse. "Of course, dear. I understand completely. Just know that you're in our prayers." As we'd walked away, David had leaned down to whisper in my ear, "She's just being nosy, Mom. Trust me, you don't need that kind of drama in your life." But I had wanted that phone number. I had wanted someone to call, someone to have tea with, someone to talk to about something other than my breathing problems and imagined ailments. Instead, David had crumpled that possibility before it could even take root. Now, sitting in this car, I realize it wasn't the first time. How many invitations had David intercepted over the past 2 years? How many times had he spoken for me, answered for me, decided for me? I think about Ruth Morrison, my friend of 30 years who used to call every Wednesday until suddenly she stopped. When I'd asked David about it, he'd said, "Ruth mentioned that you seemed tired the last few times she called, so I told her you might need a break from phone calls for a while." A break that had somehow become permanent. And then there was my daughter Lisa in Portland. We used to talk every Sunday evening, but those calls had become less frequent over the past year. When I'd mentioned missing them, David had shrugged. "Lisa's busy with her own life, Mom. You can't expect her to drop everything just to chat with you every week. Besides, you know how these long-distance calls stress you out." Did they stress me out? I tried to remember, but David's version of events had become the only version I heard. He was always there, interpreting, explaining, managing my relationships for me. "She probably thinks you're getting too dependent on these calls," he'd added. "It's healthier for both of you to have some space." Space. That's what my whole world had become, empty space where friendships used to be, where my daughter's voice used to be, where my own choices used to be. I think about Dr. Martinez too. David had started coming to my appointments 6 months ago, saying he was worried about my memory, that I might forget to tell the doctor important symptoms. He'd sit right there in the room, answering questions for me, clarifying what I really meant when I tried to describe how I was feeling. "Mom tends to downplay her symptoms," he'd told Dr. Martinez during my last visit. "And sometimes she gets confused about when things happen or how severe they are. I just want to make sure you get an accurate picture." Dr. Martinez had nodded appreciatively. "What a devoted son," his expression had said. "How wonderful that he cares so much about his mother's health." But in that moment, I'd felt myself becoming smaller, less reliable, less trustworthy, even in my own doctor's eyes. David's help had transformed me from a patient describing her own experience into a confused elderly woman who needed interpretation. Even my mail had changed. David had convinced me to have it forwarded to his address, for security reasons, after a neighbor's house was burglarized. "You don't want people knowing when you're getting checks or important documents," he'd said. "It's safer if I screen everything first." So now my letters, my bills, my communications with the outside world all passed through David's hands first. He decided what was important enough for me to see, what was junk that would only confuse me. Sitting in this driveway, I suddenly see the pattern with crystal clarity. David hasn't just isolated me from people, he's isolated me from my own life. Every connection to the outside world, every source of information, every relationship has been filtered through him until his voice has become the only voice I hear. No wonder I doubt my own perceptions. When someone controls every input in your life, their version of reality becomes the only reality you know. The question is, how long has this been happening, and how much of my world has already disappeared without me even noticing? We finally make it inside the house, and I think maybe the worst is over. Maybe David will retreat to his room to watch football like he usually does on Sunday afternoons, and I can have a few hours of peace to recover from the car ride. But as I set my purse down on the kitchen counter, I can feel him following me, his anger still radiating like heat from a furnace. "You know what your problem is, Mom," he says, and I freeze. I'd hoped we were done talking about my problems for today. "What's that, honey?" I ask, trying to keep my voice light, pleasant. Maybe if I seem agreeable, he'll drop it. "You're selfish," he says matter-of-factly, as if he's commenting on the weather. Completely and utterly selfish. The word hits me like a physical blow. Selfish? I've spent my entire adult life taking care of other people. I raised 3 children, nursed Robert through his cancer, volunteered at the church for decades. When have I ever been selfish? "I don't understand," I say quietly. "Of course you don't," David snorts. "Because you can only see things from your own perspective. Do you ever think about what these Sunday drives are like for me?" I turn to face him, genuinely confused. "You said you wanted to take me to church. You insisted on it when I offered to ask Mrs. Henderson for rides." "Because I'm a good son," he explodes, his voice echoing off the kitchen walls. "Because that's what good sons do, they sacrifice their own comfort for their aging parents, even when those parents are too self-absorbed to appreciate it." My hands are shaking as I reach for my church bulletin, still folded in my purse. But my fingers won't cooperate, and the paper flutters to the floor like a wounded bird. "Great," David says with disgust. "Now you can't even hold a piece of paper. Maybe you really are losing your mind like I tell people." The words stop me cold. "Like you tell people? What?" He looks genuinely surprised, as if he said something he didn't mean to say. "You said, like I tell people. What do you tell people about me?" David's face goes through a series of expressions, surprise, calculation, then that familiar condescending smile. "Nothing bad, Mom. I prepare them, you know. So they're not shocked by how much you've declined." My legs feel weak, and I grip the kitchen counter for support. "Declined how?" "Well, the forgetfulness, the confusion, the way you get so anxious about simple things." He speaks slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "I mean, look at you right now, you can barely stand up straight, you're shaking over dropping a piece of paper. People need to understand that you're not the woman you used to be." The room seems to tilt around me. "What exactly do you tell them?" "The truth," David says, his voice taking on that patient, long-suffering tone. "That you're having some cognitive issues, that you get confused and paranoid sometimes. That you imagine health problems that aren't really there. That you need more supervision than you want to admit." Each word is like a nail being driven into my coffin. I think about Pastor Williams, Mrs. Henderson, Dr. Martinez. How many of them now see me as a confused old woman instead of Margaret Williams, the person I've been my whole life? "I don't imagine health problems," I say weakly, but even as I say it, I can hear David's earlier words echoing in my head about attention-seeking behavior and psychological symptoms. "Don't you?" David steps closer, and I back against the counter. The brain tumor scare, the heart palpitations last year, now this breathing thing. Do you see the pattern, Mom? Because everyone else does. I want to argue, to defend myself, but doubt creeps in again. Have I been imagining things? Creating problems where none exist? Maybe it's early dementia, David continues, his voice almost gentle now, which makes it somehow worse. Dr. Martinez mentioned that anxiety and hypochondria can be early signs. That's why I've been trying to help manage your medical care, to make sure you get proper treatment before it gets worse. He said that. My voice comes out as barely a whisper. He's concerned about you, Mom. We all are. David reaches out and touches my shoulder, and I flinch involuntarily. That's why I think we need to start seriously considering other living arrangements. Somewhere you can get the care you need. There it is, the threat that's been hovering unspoken between us for months. Sunset Manor. The nursing home. The place where people go to wait for death. I'm not ready for that, I say, and I'm horrified by how desperate I sound. I know you don't think you are, David says with false sympathy. But that's part of the problem, isn't it? People with cognitive decline rarely recognize their own limitations. I stare at him, this man who came from my body, who I taught to walk and talk and tie his shoes. This person who has systematically convinced everyone in my life, including me, that I'm losing my mind. You want me gone, I whisper, the realization hitting me like a sledgehammer. I want what's best for you, David says smoothly. And what's best for me too. I've put my whole life on hold to take care of you, Mom. I've never married, never had children of my own, because I've been too busy managing your crises. The words cut deep because there's just enough truth in them to hurt. David is 45 and single. He does live in his childhood bedroom. He does drive me places and help with things I used to manage myself. But as I stand in my own kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own life, I suddenly realize something that chills me to the bone. David hasn't been taking care of me. He's been taking care of my reputation, my relationships, my independence, taking care to destroy them, piece by piece, until there's nothing left of Margaret Williams except what he allows to exist. You've been planning this, I say, and my voice sounds different now, stronger somehow. All of it. The isolation, the stories about my declining health, turning people against me. You want me in that nursing home. David's mask slips for just a moment, and I see something cold and calculating in his eyes. Don't be ridiculous, Mom, he says, but his voice lacks its usual conviction. Now you're sounding paranoid again. I escape to my bedroom, my hands still shaking as I close the door behind me. David doesn't follow, he never does. Once he's delivered his poison, he retreats to let it work through my system, let me marinate in self-doubt and fear until next Sunday's fresh dose. I sink onto the edge of my bed, the same bed I shared with Robert for 38 years, and catch sight of myself in the vanity mirror across the room. The woman staring back at me is a stranger, hollow-cheeked, frightened eyes, shoulders curved inward as if trying to disappear. When did I become so small? I think about this morning, putting on my lavender dress with such care, adjusting Robert's pearls, trying to feel dignified. That woman in the mirror this morning had hope. This woman has none. But as I study my reflection, something Robert used to say comes floating back to me from what feels like another lifetime. Maggie, you're stronger than you know. You just forget sometimes. He'd said it during the worst years, when the kids were small and money was tight and I felt like I was drowning in dishes and diapers and endless worry. He'd said it when my mother was dying and I was trying to care for her while managing 3 teenagers. He'd said it when I went back to work at 52, terrified I was too old to learn new things. You're stronger than you know. I force myself to really look at the woman in the mirror, to see past the fear and confusion David has wrapped around me like chains. This woman raised 3 children through sleepless nights and teenage rebellions. This woman held her husband's hand through chemotherapy and radiation, never leaving his side even when the hospital chair left her back aching for days. This woman organized church fundraisers that brought in thousands of dollars, managed a household budget for decades, taught Sunday school to squirmy 5-year-olds who adored her. When did I start believing I was incompetent? I try to remember the exact moment when David's voice became more authoritative than my own instincts, when his version of events became more real than my lived experience. It wasn't sudden, it was gradual, like water wearing away stone. A comment here, a concerned expression there, a gentle correction of my confusion, until I stopped trusting my own memory. Standing up on unsteady legs, I walk to my dresser and pull out the bottom drawer. Buried under old scarves and forgotten jewelry is a small photo album I haven't looked at in months. David suggested I put it away because looking at old pictures was making me too emotional, living in the past instead of dealing with present realities. But now I flip through the pages with hungry eyes. Here's Robert and me on our wedding day, my face glowing with confidence and joy. Here I am holding newborn David, looking tired but radiant with love. Here's a picture from 5 years ago at Lisa's college graduation. I'm standing straight and tall, my arm around my daughter, both of us laughing at something Robert said just before he snapped the photo. This is who I am. This is who I've always been. Not the confused, needy, attention-seeking invalid David has convinced everyone I've become. I flip to a more recent photo, last Christmas, before David's campaign of control became so obvious. I'm wearing a red sweater, my hair freshly styled, surrounded by my grandchildren. I look like a grandmother who bakes cookies and tells stories, not like someone losing her mind. The breathing problems are real. Dr. Martinez confirmed the medication side effects. The forgetfulness David talks about is mostly exhaustion from walking on eggshells around him. The confusion he describes to others is actually my normal response to his constantly changing rules and gaslighting. I think about Mrs. Patterson's kind face when she offered me her phone number, how genuinely disappointed she looked when David intercepted that connection. I remember Ruth Morrison's hurt expression the last time we spoke, when I was so anxious about saying the wrong thing that I could barely hold a conversation. She probably thinks I don't want to be her friend anymore. And Lisa, my daughter, who calls less and less because David tells her I'm having a hard day, or getting overwhelmed by phone calls. How many times has she tried to reach me only to be turned away by David's version of concern? I look at myself in the mirror again, and for the first time in months, I stand up straight. My shoulders square, my chin lifts, and I see a flash of the woman I used to be, the woman I still am underneath all of David's lies. The breathing problem isn't in my head. The isolation isn't for my own good. The gradual erosion of my relationships isn't because I'm difficult to be around. David has been systematically destroying my life, and he's been doing it with such skill that he almost convinced me to participate in my own demolition. But almost isn't completely. Robert was right, I am stronger than I know. I just forgot for a while, buried under months of psychological warfare. But forgetting isn't the same as losing something forever. Sometimes you just need the right moment, the right mirror, the right memory to help you find what was always there. I look at that woman in the glass, and for the first time in months, I don't see a victim. I see a survivor who just hasn't started fighting back yet. After staring at myself in the mirror for what feels like hours, I know I can't keep living like this. But knowing something and having the courage to act on it are two very different things. My hands still shake as I quietly open my bedroom door and listen for David. The sound of the television drifts up from the living room, some football game he's watching with the volume turned up loud. I tiptoe to my closet and feel around on the top shelf until my fingers find what I'm looking for, my old address book, the one with the cracked leather cover that I've had for 20 years. David suggested I throw it away months ago, saying it was cluttered with outdated information, and that I should simplify my life. But some stubborn part of me had hidden it instead of discarding it. Now I understand why. I flip through the pages with trembling fingers, seeing names I haven't thought about in months. Ruth Morrison, my Wednesday phone friend who David said needed a break from our conversations. Janet Phillips, who used to organize our monthly book club until David convinced me the evening meetings were too much stimulation for someone with my anxiety issues. Dorothy Kim, my old volunteer partner from the hospital gift shop, who stopped calling after David told her I was too tired for visitors. Each name represents a connection David severed, a piece of my world he carved away until I was left with nothing but his version of reality. I turn to the M section and find what I'm really looking for: Morrison, Ruth, 5550847. My heart pounds as I stare at those numbers. It's been 4 months since we last spoke. What if she's angry with me? What if David was right and she really did find me tiresome? But then I remember Ruth's face at Robert's funeral, how she'd held my hand during the service and brought me casseroles for weeks afterward. That wasn't the face of someone who found me burdensome. That was the face of a true friend. I move quietly to my old rotary phone, the one David keeps saying I should replace with something more modern, but hasn't gotten around to changing yet. Now I'm grateful for his procrastination. This phone feels familiar, trustworthy, like an old friend in itself. My finger hovers over the dial. What will I say? How do I explain months of silence? How do I tell her that my own son has been systematically isolating me from everyone I care about? The football crowd on TV erupts in cheers, covering any sound I might make. I take a shaky breath and begin to dial. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times. Maybe she's not home. Maybe this is a sign I should hang up, accept my situation, stop making trouble. Hello? Ruth's familiar voice fills the receiver, and I almost sob with relief. Ruth? It's Margaret Williams. There's a pause, and I brace myself for coldness, for rejection, for confirmation of David's story about my burdensomeness. Margaret. Oh my goodness, I've been so worried about you. Her voice is warm, concerned, genuinely happy to hear from me. How are you, honey? I've called several times, but David always said you were resting or having a difficult day. My throat tightens. He told you that. Every time I called for the past 4 months. I started to worry that your health was really declining, but I didn't want to intrude if you needed space. Ruth's voice becomes gentler. Are you okay? You sound different. I want to tell her everything, about the Sunday car rides, the manipulation, the isolation, the way David has convinced everyone I'm losing my mind. But the words stick in my throat. What if she doesn't believe me? What if David has poisoned her opinion of me too thoroughly? I've been struggling, I say carefully. With your health. With other things. I glance toward my bedroom door, listening for David's footsteps. Ruth, can I ask you something? When you called and talked to David, did he say anything else about me? Another pause. Well, he mentioned that you'd been having some memory issues, getting confused about things. He said you were seeing doctors about it and that stress made it worse. Ruth's voice becomes even more gentle. Margaret, is there something wrong? Something you're not telling me? I close my eyes, gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. Ruth, I need you to know something. My memory is fine. I'm not confused. I'm not declining. I'm being controlled. The words hang in the air between us, and I hold my breath, waiting for her response. Controlled how? Ruth asks quietly, and I can hear something shift in her voice, concern becoming alarm. By David. He intercepts my calls, speaks for me at doctor appointments, isolates me from friends. He's convinced everyone I'm losing my mind, but Ruth, I'm not. I'm scared, but I'm not crazy. Oh, honey, Ruth breathes, and I can hear tears in her voice. Oh, Margaret. I wondered, some of the things David said didn't match the woman I've known for 30 years. But I thought maybe I just didn't want to accept that you were struggling. Relief floods through me like warm water. She believes me. After months of David's gaslighting, someone finally believes me. I don't know what to do, I whisper. We'll figure it out together, Ruth says firmly. Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere David won't know. For the first time in months, I feel something I'd almost forgotten: hope. Tuesday morning arrives gray and drizzling, matching my nervous energy as I wait for David to leave for work. He's taking longer than usual, lingering over his coffee and checking his phone repeatedly. I try to act normal, reading yesterday's newspaper at the kitchen table, but my heart pounds so loudly I'm sure he can hear it. You seem restless today, Mom, he says, not looking up from his phone. Everything okay? Just tired, I manage, forcing my voice to sound weak and confused, the voice he expects from me. Didn't sleep well. Maybe you should rest today. No need to overexert yourself. He finally stands, gathering his briefcase and keys. I'll be home around 6. Try not to answer the phone if it rings, you know how those salespeople upset you. I nod obediently, though my stomach churns at how easily he assumes I'll follow his rules. After what feels like an eternity, I hear his car pull out of the driveway. I wait another 10 minutes, just to be sure, before rushing to my bedroom window to confirm he's really gone. My hands shake as I dial the church office. Ruth and I had planned this during our hushed phone conversation yesterday. She would call Pastor Williams and arrange a meeting, somewhere David wouldn't think to look for me. St. Matthew's Church, this is Helen speaking. Helen, hi, this is Margaret Williams. I was wondering if Pastor Williams might have a few minutes to speak with me today. Privately. Of course, dear. He actually asked me to expect your call. Can you come in around 10 o'clock? I glance at the clock, 8:45. Just enough time to walk the 6 blocks to church before David might check on me during his lunch break. I'll be there. The walk to St. Matthew's feels surreal. These are the same sidewalks I've traveled countless times, but today everything looks different. The familiar houses seem to watch me with curious eyes, as if they know I'm breaking David's rules. My breathing is labored by the time I reach the church, but for once it's from exertion and nerves, not fear of David's reaction to the sound. Pastor Williams meets me at the side entrance, his kind face creased with concern. He's been our family pastor for 15 years, the man who married Robert and me, who baptized all my children, who held my hand when Robert died. But as we walk to his office, I realize David has been managing even this relationship, always present during any conversation, always speaking for me. Margaret, Pastor Williams says gently, closing his office door behind us. Ruth called me yesterday. She's very worried about you. I sink into the familiar chair across from his desk, the same one where Robert and I used to meet for marriage counseling during our difficult years, where we planned Robert's funeral service, where I thought I'd never sit alone. I don't know where to start, I whisper. Start wherever feels right, he says, settling into his chair with the patience that's made him beloved by his congregation for decades. So I tell him. Everything. The Sunday car rides that have become torture sessions. The way David transforms the moment we leave church property. How he's systematically isolated me from friends, intercepts my phone calls, speaks for me at medical appointments. How he's convinced everyone, including me, at times, that I'm losing my mind. Pastor Williams listens without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. When I finish, he's quiet for a long moment. Margaret, he says finally, I owe you an apology. I blink at him, confused. An apology? I've seen some concerning behavior from David over the past year, but I interpreted it as overprotective love. The way he hovers during church social events, how he answers questions directed at you, his insistence on driving you everywhere. Pastor Williams shakes his head. I thought he was being a devoted son. I should have recognized the signs of control. Relief washes over me so powerfully I almost sob. Someone in authority, someone David respects, finally sees the truth. What David is doing to you, Pastor Williams continues, it has a name. It's called elder abuse, and it's more common than people realize. You're not losing your mind, Margaret. You're being systematically manipulated and controlled. The words, elder abuse, hit me like a physical blow. I've heard the term before, seen news stories about horrible people who steal from nursing homes or neglect their aging parents. But those stories always featured obviously evil villains, not devoted sons who kiss their mother's cheeks in church. I know it's hard to accept, Pastor Williams says gently. Especially when the abuser is your own child. But what you've described, the isolation, the gaslighting, the threats about nursing home placement, these are classic patterns of psychological and emotional abuse. But everyone thinks he's wonderful, I protest weakly. That's part of the pattern too. Abusers often maintain perfect public personas while terrorizing their victims in private. It makes it harder for victims to be believed, and harder for them to believe their own experiences. Pastor Williams opens his desk drawer and pulls out a small pamphlet. I want to give you some information about elder abuse resources in our area. There are people who specialize in helping situations like yours. As he hands me the pamphlet, I notice my hands have stopped shaking. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm not crazy, not imagining things, not being overly dramatic. There's also someone I'd like you to meet, Pastor Williams says. A counselor named Dr. Sarah Chen who works specifically with elder abuse cases. She has an office just 2 blocks from here, and she's agreed to see you this afternoon if you're ready. I look at this man who has shepherded my family through decades of joys and sorrows, and I see not pity in his eyes, but respect. He's treating me like the competent woman I've always been, not the confused invalid David has convinced everyone I've become. I'm ready, I say, and mean it. Dr. Sarah Chen's office is nothing like I expected. Instead of the sterile, clinical environment I'd imagined, it feels warm and welcoming, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and a gentle fountain that masks our conversation from anyone who might be listening. She's younger than I expected too, maybe in her 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Margaret, she says after I've finished telling my story for the second time today, what you've experienced is textbook psychological abuse. I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and your reactions are completely normal. But I let it happen, I say, the shame burning in my chest. I'm his mother. I should have stopped it somehow. Abuse works by gradually eroding your sense of reality and self-worth, Dr. Chen explains gently. It's designed to make you question your own perceptions. The fact that you're sitting here today, recognizing what's happening and seeking help, shows incredible strength. She pulls out a legal pad and writes something down. I'm going to give you some resources for elder abuse victims, including a support group that meets here weekly. But first, we need to think about your safety and your support system. Who else in your life can you trust? I think immediately of Ruth, who made this all possible with her belief and encouragement. My friend Ruth Morrison. She's the one who helped me contact Pastor Williams. Good. Anyone else? My heart clenches as I think about my daughter. Lisa. My daughter in Portland. But David has been. I struggle with the words. He's been managing my relationship with her for months. She probably thinks I don't want to talk to her anymore. Dr. Chen nods knowingly. Isolating victims from their support systems is a classic tactic. Can you think of a way to contact Lisa without David knowing? I could call from here, maybe. Or from Ruth's house. That's a good idea. What do you think Lisa's reaction might be to learning about David's behavior? I consider this carefully. Lisa has always been protective of family, fiercely loyal but also practical. She'll be horrified. And angry. Lisa doesn't tolerate anyone mistreating people she loves. That sounds like exactly the kind of support you need right now. Dr. Chen helps me use her office phone to call Lisa. My hands shake as I dial the familiar number, praying my daughter will answer. Hello? Lisa's voice sounds rushed, distracted. Lisa. It's Mom. There's a pause, then her voice completely changes, becomes softer, more focused. Mom. Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. David keeps saying you're having bad days or that the phone calls are too overwhelming for you. Are you okay? Tears spring to my eyes. Lisa, I need to tell you something important, and I need you to listen to everything before you respond. Of course. What's wrong? So I tell her. About David's transformation after Robert's death, about the Sunday car rides, the isolation, the threats of nursing home placement. About how he's been intercepting our communications and telling her I'm too confused or tired to talk. The silence on the other end stretches so long I wonder if we've been disconnected. Lisa. I'm here, she says, and her voice is tight with controlled rage. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong. I should have come to visit despite what David said. He's very convincing, I say softly. That doesn't excuse it. I abandoned you when you needed me most. Lisa's voice cracks. How long has this been going on? About 2 years, but it's gotten much worse in the past 6 months. Jesus Christ. Lisa is quiet for a moment, then her voice becomes businesslike, the tone she uses when she's solving problems. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm booking a flight today. I'll be there tomorrow. Lisa, you don't have to. Mom, yes I do. David has been abusing you and lying to me about it. This ends now. She pauses. Are you safe tonight? I glance at Dr. Chen, who nods encouragingly. I think so. He doesn't usually, he's never physically hurt me. Psychological abuse is still abuse, Mom. Don't minimize what he's done to you. Lisa's voice softens. I love you so much, and I'm so proud of you for reaching out for help. That took incredible courage. After we hang up, Dr. Chen smiles at me. How do you feel? Scared, I admit. But less alone. Good. Now, we need to think about documentation. Has David ever left any evidence of his behavior? Emails, texts, anything written? I shake my head, then remember something. He monitors my mail. It all goes to his address now. And he's been coming to my doctor appointments for months, speaking for me. That's actually helpful information. We can contact your doctor to clarify what David has been saying versus what you've actually communicated. Dr. Chen makes more notes. I'm also going to give you information about Adult Protective Services. They investigate elder abuse cases and can provide additional resources. Will they believe me? Margaret, you're not the confused, declining woman David has portrayed you as. You're articulate, coherent, and your story is consistent with classic abuse patterns. Yes, they'll believe you. As I prepare to leave Dr. Chen's office, she hands me a card with her direct number. Call me anytime, day or night. You're not alone in this anymore. Walking back toward home, I feel something I haven't experienced in 2 years, the weight of people who care about me, who believe me, who are willing to help. Ruth, Pastor Williams, Dr. Chen, and soon Lisa, a network of support that David's manipulation couldn't completely destroy. For the first time since this nightmare began, I have allies. And tomorrow, when Lisa arrives, David will finally face someone who won't be charmed by his devoted son act. The thought both terrifies and exhilarates me. Lisa arrives at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, just as David is pulling into the driveway from his lunch break. I watch from the living room window as my daughter steps out of her rental car, tall, confident, with Robert's determined jaw and my stubborn streak. She's traveled 3,000 miles in less than 24 hours, and the fury radiating from her is almost visible. David's face goes through a series of expressions as he recognizes her: surprise, calculation, then that familiar mask of concern sliding into place. "Lisa. What a wonderful surprise," he calls out, his voice warm with false delight. "Mom didn't mention you were coming for a visit." "That's because Mom didn't know," Lisa says coolly, not moving toward him for the usual hug. "I wanted to surprise her. And you." I open the front door, and Lisa brushes past David without acknowledgement to wrap me in her arms. She holds me tighter and longer than usual, and I can feel her taking inventory, noting how thin I've become, how fragile I feel in her embrace. "Hi, Mom," she whispers in my ear. "I'm here now." David follows us inside, his confusion beginning to show around the edges of his smile. "This is such a treat. How long can you stay?" "As long as necessary," Lisa says, settling beside me on the couch and taking my hand in hers. The gesture is protective, claiming, and David notices immediately. "Is everything okay?" David asks, his tone shifting to concerned brother. "You seem tense." Lisa looks at him directly for the first time since arriving. "We need to talk, David. All three of us." "Of course," David says, but I can see him mentally scrambling, trying to figure out what's changed. "What's on your mind?" "Mom called me yesterday," Lisa says simply. "We had a very interesting conversation about what's been happening in this house." David's face goes very still. "I see. And what exactly did Mom tell you?" The way he says, "Mom," now, with just a hint of condescension, as if my account can't be trusted, makes Lisa's eyes flash with anger. "She told me about the car rides, David. About how you scream at her for breathing. About how you've isolated her from her friends and intercepted her phone calls. About how you've been telling people she's losing her mind to cover up your abuse." "Lisa," David says, his voice taking on that patient, reasonable tone I know so well, "I think Mom may have misunderstood some situations. You know how elderly people can sometimes." "Stop." Lisa's voice cuts through his words like a blade. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me the way you've been gaslighting her. I've talked to Ruth Morrison. I've talked to Pastor Williams. I know what you've been doing." David's mask slips completely for just a moment, and I see something ugly flash across his face: rage at being caught, fury at losing control. But then he regroups, switching tactics. "Look, I know this looks bad, but you don't understand the stress I've been under," he says, his voice becoming defensive. "I've sacrificed everything to take care of her. My career, my personal life, everything. Sometimes I lose my temper, but it's because I'm at my breaking point." "You've been abusing our mother," Lisa says flatly. "There's no excuse for that." "I would never abuse Mom," David protests. "I love her. Everything I do is for her own good." "Then explain this," Lisa says, pulling out her phone. She plays a recording, her conversation with Ruth, where Ruth describes months of intercepted phone calls and David's stories about my declining mental health. Then Pastor Williams' voice, admitting he'd noticed controlling behavior but misinterpreted it. David's face goes pale as he realizes his carefully constructed narrative is crumbling in real time. "This is ridiculous," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. "You're taking everything out of context." "Am I?" Lisa stands up, towering over him. "Because I also called Adult Protective Services this morning. They're very interested in your context." The color drains completely from David's face. "You called APS." "I did. And they're opening an investigation. They'll want to interview Mom separately, away from your influence. They'll want to talk to her doctors about how you've been speaking for her in appointments. They'll want to examine the pattern of isolation you've created." David looks between Lisa and me, and for the first time in 2 years, I see fear in his eyes instead of confidence. "Mom," he says, turning to me with desperation. Tell her this is all a misunderstanding. Tell her I take good care of you. I look at this man who came from my body, who I loved with everything I had for 45 years. The little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who brought me dandelions from the yard, who cried when I read him sad stories. No, David, I say quietly, my voice steadier than it's been in months. I won't lie for you anymore. What you've done to me, it's not love. It's not care. It's abuse. Something breaks in David's expression, the last pretense of the devoted son finally shattering completely. Fine, he snarls, his voice turning cold and vicious. You want to see what abandonment really looks like? You're on your own now, old woman. Don't come crawling back to me when you realize how much you need me. He storms toward the door, then turns back with a cruel smile. Good luck finding anyone else who'll put up with your neediness and your constant health complaints. After he slams the door, the house falls silent except for the sound of his car peeling out of the driveway. Lisa sits back down beside me, putting her arm around my shoulders. How do you feel? She asks gently. I think about the question seriously. I feel scared, uncertain about the future, guilty about my son's pain despite everything he's done. But underneath all of that, I feel something I'd almost forgotten existed, free. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the community garden at Sunrise Village, a senior living community just 20 minutes from Lisa's new house in Portland. The morning sun warms my face as I tend to my tomato plants, something I haven't been able to do in over 2 years. My breathing is steady and calm, no longer the labored wheeze that once triggered David's rage. Dr. Martinez confirmed what I'd suspected all along during my first appointment after moving here. The breathing issues were indeed a side effect of my heart medication, completely normal and manageable. But more importantly, he noted that my anxiety levels had dropped dramatically, which had improved my overall respiratory function. Stress can exacerbate physical symptoms significantly, he'd explained. Now that you're in a healthier environment, your body can heal. I think about that word, heal, as I water my cherry tomatoes. It's not just my breathing that's gotten better. My appetite has returned, and I've gained back 10 of the 15 pounds I'd lost during those dark months with David. My sleep is deeper, more restful, without the constant hypervigilance that kept me listening for his footsteps, his moods, his disapproval. Good morning, Margaret, calls Dorothy Kim, my old volunteer partner from the hospital gift shop. She moved into Sunrise Village just last month, and we've rekindled our friendship as if no time had passed. David had been wrong about so many things, but especially about people not wanting to be around me. My friends hadn't grown tired of me, they'd been systematically pushed away. Morning, Dorothy. How did your granddaughter's recital go last night? Beautifully. I took videos to show you later. She settles onto the bench beside my garden plot. Are you ready for your big day tomorrow? Tomorrow. I take a deep breath, feeling only the slightest flutter of nerves. Tomorrow I'm speaking at the Elder Abuse Awareness Conference in downtown Portland, sharing my story with social workers, healthcare providers, and family members who suspect their loved ones might be experiencing abuse. It was Dr. Chen who first suggested I consider advocacy work. Your story could help so many people, she'd said during one of our sessions. Both other victims who need to know they're not alone, and family members who need to recognize the signs. The first time I spoke publicly was terrifying, just a small support group at the community center near Lisa's house. But when I finished, 3 other women approached me afterward. One was experiencing financial abuse from her nephew. Another recognized her son's controlling behavior in my story. The third was a daughter who realized she'd been missing signs in her own mother's situation. That's when I understood, my voice, which David had tried so hard to silence, might be exactly what other people needed to hear. The legal proceedings took 4 months to resolve. Adult Protective Services substantiated their investigation, and David was required to attend court-mandated counseling and anger management classes. He was also placed on the church's restricted volunteer list and lost his position as deacon. The community that once admired him now understood the truth about his devotion. I still struggle with guilt about David sometimes. Dr. Chen says that's normal, that children who abuse their parents often experience their own trauma, and loving parents naturally want to help rather than punish. But she also reminds me that enabling abuse doesn't help anyone, including the abuser. David and I haven't spoken since that day Lisa confronted him. He sends birthday cards with generic messages, and Lisa tells me he asks about my health during their brief, strained phone conversations. Part of me hopes that losing control over me will eventually lead him to genuine self-reflection and healing. But I've learned that I can't fix him, and trying to do so nearly destroyed me. Ruth visits every few weeks, driving up from our old town with church gossip and updates about mutual friends. Pastor Williams calls monthly to check on me and share how the congregation has implemented new elder abuse awareness training. Even Mrs. Patterson sent a lovely letter apologizing for not recognizing the signs and expressing how much she'd always enjoyed our brief conversations after service. But it's Lisa who has been my greatest gift through this healing process. Not just her fierce protection during the crisis, but her patience with my recovery, her celebration of my small victories, her insistence that I'm not a burden but a beloved mother reclaiming her life. You know what I'm proudest of? Lisa said last week as we were planting bulbs for next spring's garden. Not that you survived David's abuse, though that took incredible strength. I'm proudest that you chose to use your experience to help others. That's the woman who raised me. As I sit in this peaceful garden, surrounded by friends and purpose, I think about the woman in the church pews 6 months ago, frightened, isolated, convinced she was losing her mind. I want to reach back through time and tell her, you're stronger than you know. You deserve better. Your voice matters. And when I speak tomorrow, that's exactly what I'll tell the people who need to hear it most. The tomatoes are ripening beautifully. Like me, they just needed the right environment to flourish.